Please welcome a man I love. I love him like a younger brother. Please welcome philosophy professor, host of Give Them an Argument. He has two pieces in Jacobin that we're going to talk about. Please welcome Professor Ben Burgis. Now, are you in Michigan or are you back? Where are you?
Yeah, I am in Michigan. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
You didn't change the fish tank, Ben. I'm so sick of it. How many goddamn times I have to tell you to change the fish tank for your goddamn fish? I didn't want the fish. You wanted the Betta Splendens because you like to watch Betta Splendens eat each other, Ben. Change the fucking...
Okay. Has it been taken care of?
It is eerie how you recorded that and then just replayed it like as was.
Can you turn your volume up a little?
Yeah, let me see.
Nobody would dare talk to you that way, right? Nobody would nag you.
Never. All right.
I have a theory about nagging. Would you like to hear it while you turn your volume up?
Sure.
I have a theory. Well, it's okay. The Lugnuts. How were the Lugnuts last week? You went to go see the Lugnuts play.
Yeah.
Favorite band from the 70s also turns out to be a minor league baseball team. There must be a team. There must be a band called the Lugnuts, right?
Probably.
How'd they do?
Yeah. No, I mean they won. But it's not. I mean, I won't claim to be that emotionally invested in it. You know, they're playing. They're obviously playing another minor league team you've never heard of, but whatever. It was fun. After the last year, just being able to be outside, sitting in the stands, watching a game was fun in itself.
Hang on for 1 second. We have a far left person, a woman in the chat room who just wrote D's Lugnuts. Okay, I want to talk about your two pieces, Jacobin, but I want to ask you about D's Nuts.
Yes.
When my son turned 10, his friends would keep going, D's Nuts, D's Nuts. And then my daughter, D's Nuts. And then on office hours, there's this whole meme of these nuts, D's Nuts. And now you have people my age and older making D's Nuts. I mean, people with doctorates making D's Nuts jokes. What is D's Nuts?
Well, it sounds like you know more about it than I do, but
you're younger. You're much younger than I am, and I know when you were an adolescent, we didn't have D's Nuts when I was a kid. What does D's Nuts mean?
I mean, again, you seem like you're extensively familiar with the concept. I mean, you could probably explain it to me, but I don't know. I don't think I have anything on that topic, David. I'm sorry.
Can I ask you one question?
Sure.
We'll start. I was reading a study from was it Bleckley Circle? Who cracked the code? Anyway, this is something that they use to crack. I want you to spell IHOP and then say Ness, please. And the Bletchley Circle, I believe, this was a test they used. Spell IHOP and then say Ness.
IHOP Ness.
Oh, I got you. It's okay. Were you able to? Now we're gonna have Zizek on the show, I think.
Yeah. No, he'll enjoy this.
Can I do that to him?
You should, honestly. I think. I think Zizek. He enjoys the
sophisticated humor like that.
Yeah. Well, I can show you some YouTube videos of him telling jokes. You might be surprised.
Right. All right. Last thought, and then we'll talk about your Jacobin pieces. Conan, the last show that he did, he said, one thing I know is true. Comedy comes from really smart people acting stupid. I think I didn't quite get it right. But he said, I don't know much, but I do know that great comedy comes from really intelligent people behaving like idiots. And I remember my son once came to a writing room I was working in, and he was like 10, and he spent the day watching us, and he said, he was 10 years old. He said, I get it. You read all day, and then you act stupid. Like you read, and then you act like you missed the entire point of everything that you read. That's what he said when he was 10 years old. Anyway, okay. What were your two Jacobin pieces? Let's talk about that. And by the way, we're going to argue later. I say Nina Turner won.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, look, so the two pieces, the one of the two that's a little bit more timely is about the infrastructure bill. So it is unsubtly entitled "Bipartisanship is Garbage," and then the one that's a little bit more evergreen is called "Ban Private Beaches," which is self-explanatory.
Right. Bipartisanship accomplished nothing, right? No civil rights movements were ever passed. They say the Civil Rights Acts of 64 and 65 passed through bipartisanship, but the 13th Amendment, the 14th Amendment were not bipartisan. It really was split down partisan lines, right?
Yeah, and I think that's right. And the Civil Rights Act, I think that's really because, I think the reason that was as bipartisan as it was is because that was kind of in the middle of, or even leading to some of the partisan realignment that happened since then, right? So, I think that you had Republicans who voted for it, who would have been Democrats, 5 or 10 years later, and vice versa for some Democrats who voted against it, although some did stay in the party. But I think that that the big point about this, and if you look at the difference between the original bill and the bipartisan compromise bill for infrastructure, it's really bad. It's there are, hundreds of billions of dollars of spending for housing, for schools, for home care, for what little was being done, for the climate and all of this, that are gone in the bipartisan version. And by the way, I just want to say I'm not addressing in this piece, and I'm not really that interested in the question of whether the reason that they didn't, that they did it this way instead of just passing the whole thing through reconciliation was because, Joe Manchin or whoever made them, or whether it was, at least in part, because of Joe Biden's frequently expressed enthusiasm for renewed bipartisan cooperation. He was certainly doing a victory lap about the bipartisanship, whether it was his idea or not. But the effect of all of this is theoretically really devastating. And I know the party line is, but that's okay. You can have all that back in the reconciliation bill, the separate bill, that deals with all the human infrastructure stuff. But maybe, right? And it's possible there have been developments, today, that I haven't seen yet. But I would just say this about that, one, I'm aware of all the people who say right now that they won't support the bipartisan bill if the reconciliation bill isn't always passed. I will say that I have the eeriest feeling hearing that I've watched this movie before. I get flashbacks to the long lead up to Obamacare being passed, when there were
And
dozens
the public option.
Democrats saying they wouldn't vote for it if it didn't include the public option, et cetera, right? So maybe it'll happen, right? But right now I feel a little bit like Charlie Brown racing at the football. And then and also I would say that if the reconciliation bill doesn't happen first, then hey, it only takes one or two Democrats changing their mind for it not to happen. And it seems like that's made much politically easier but we just passed this massive infrastructure bill, so it's not so bad, right? That I stopped you, I, Joe Manchin, I, Kirsten Sinema, whoever, stopped you from having the reconciliation bill. But then the bigger question I'm interested in there is, why is it that certainly again, whether it was Manchin or whoever forced him to, or he wanted it to, Biden was certainly at least doing a victory lap about the bipartisanship and look at how he can get things done and make things bipartisan. And the question is, why is that a good thing? Because it seems to me that if you think back to a lot of the worst things that have happened in the last 20 years, the war in Iraq was pretty bipartisan. Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden and Chuck Schumer and Harry Reid and a lot of other people voted for that. The Patriot Act was so bipartisan that only one senator voted against it, Russ Feingold from Wisconsin. The beginning of the Forever War, we're still fighting in Afghanistan, was even more bipartisan than that. There were no senators who voted against it. So all of those things were very bipartisan. Whereas, not only is there not a single Republican who would be willing to vote for Medicare for all, for example, but you're not even going to get a single Republican vote for any kind of renewed push for a public option. You're not going to get a single Republican vote for a $15 minimum wage, which you didn't have when it looked like that vote was going to happen in the first place. And so my take on that would just be that, taking a step back and thinking about this, okay, so we have two parties in the United States, and one of them, the Democratic Party, is sort of a weird and complicated party. It's not really like the kind of political party you'd have in Europe, because we don't have a separate Labor Party or Socialist Party or Social Democratic Party or whatever, because of our weird electoral system and a bunch of laws to make it harder for third parties and whatever, right? All the reasons everybody knows we don't have a separate party like that, which means that politicians who would normally be part of that party end up being part of the Democratic Party. If they get elected as Democrats. And then even outside of that sort of Bernie-crat wing, the Democratic Party is where the labor unions are, and so they could exert a little bit of influence, not very much in practice, but a little bit. Now, all that said, the Democratic establishment is obviously firmly in the pockets of the owning class. We all know this. But then the Republican Party is even more firmly in the pockets of the owning class, because there is no Bernie wing of the Republican Party. There is no equivalent of the labor unions as a countervailing social force in the Republican Party. So what this means when you put it together is, anything that can get widespread bipartisan support is probably awful, right? Either it's just something that's completely uncontroversial, right? Or it's very bad news.
Well, is it awful or not enough?
Well, so I think that
what's in it?
In the infrastructure case, it's not enough. I think a lot of that falls into the uncontroversial part, because the stuff that's still in the infrastructure bill is stuff that certainly doesn't threaten any corporate interest, right? Look, it's good to build highways.
Water, they're going to get the lead out, right?
Yeah, this is all stuff.
So there is some good. There is some good stuff in it.
There are good things in it, but those are good things.
Is there anything horrible in it?
Not saying it is horrible. What I am saying is that I think that anything that's going to get widespread bipartisan cooperation is going to be either stuff that's it doesn't necessarily it doesn't really threaten the interests of or even adversely affect the interests of the 1%. they're going to be fine with it. I mean, they would also be fine with letting the lead stay in the water, but if they can make some money,
there's nothing in there that says
government contracts to get it out, they're happy to do that. Right.
There's nothing in it that says if you're a contractor who has ever built a Planned Parenthood center, then you can't get a federal contract.
Sure,
right? There's nothing.
But I mean, I'm not making the claim that there's anything in it that's bad.
So it's just not enough.
Particularly, what I am saying is that it's telling. It makes sense that what the thing that is horrible is stripping away hundreds of billions of dollars of aid for all of the human things that are desperately needed right now. And that the fact that was bipartisan, that's what it takes to make it bipartisan is super telling. Because I think that things that are going to get widespread bipartisan cooperation, not always. I mean, sometimes there might be exceptions here and there, that you can get, like there are plenty of examples of Bernie Sanders, lining up some Republicans to help him get through some, small thing to get some more veterans hospitals built or something like that. And I'm all for that, right? I think that if you're in Bernie's position, you should do that if you can. But I think that given the sort of base political facts about what the two parties are, anything that has that like sort of massive bipartisan support is likely either going to be something that's like pretty anodyne. There's really no reason that the Chamber of Commerce would dislike it. In fact, the Chamber of Commerce loves the infrastructure bill, but it's also fine. It doesn't hurt the working class either. It's just fine. Or it's going to be something that's massively screwing us up, like starting the war in Afghanistan or the Patriot Act. Because,
okay, so let me ask you a question.
The point is just like, I think that the default reaction to hearing, this is such a victory for bipartisanship, is to think, oh shit, how are these two-party establishments going to get together to screw us this time? Because that's what that usually means.
Right. Okay. Let me give you the Aaron Sorkin version, and you respond to it. The Aaron Sorkin. If we were to see this in an Aaron Sorkin movie, we would see the kid in Flint, Michigan, finally getting lead-free water after 20 years, and then they would tell the story of the infrastructure bill, and we'd cut to Joe Bartlett Biden in the Oval Office saying to Lindsey Graham, hey, come on, man. Look at this bill. You can run on this. This is bipartisan. This is something we can all take credit for. This is something that isn't a Democratic bill or a Republican bill. This is something we can take back to our constituents and say, see what we've done for you? And then we'd have the swelling strings and our eyes would water as the poor black kid in Flint is drinking healthy water. And Aaron Sorkin would tell us that that's how things get done in Washington, D.C. That's what it's all about, compromising and making sure that the other side has a piece of your victory. Is there any element of truth to that? Because that is the narrative that's foisted upon us by Hollywood and by the Democratic leadership.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that things get done when a majority of the people who have to vote for them. I think that very oftentimes, with regard to the most important things that can get done, like if we went back to the 1930s, for example, I think that things get done when there's massive destabilizing pressure from outside the system. No,
you said you're not an accelerationist.
I'm not. I'm not. Have you heard me say?
No. So why would you
say anything?
I'm not trying to. I'm not picking a fight with you, but things don't get done when there's massive instability. Things do get done, but the right wins.
Well, what kind of instability are we talking about here? In other words, because what I said wasn't instability. What I said was destabilizing pressure, but instability by itself doesn't necessarily amount to pressure in the right direction. But if it's being destabilized by, for example, the CIO in the 30s doing massive sit-down strikes to build up, like these huge industrial unions, then then that seems like useful social pressure. Or
By the way, I should mention Richard Trumka passed away.
yeah.
And the Grim Reaper visited him and said, "You're going to die from an aneurysm in the brain." And Richard Trumka said, "No, make it a heart attack." And that's, to me, is what our labor movement is all about. He was able to negotiate with the Grim Reaper and have it be a, you're not laughing.
I was smiling, I wasn't laughing,
But we have limited time.
Yeah, no. I mean, just to be clear on the distinction though here, right? Like, accelerationism would be like, hey, let's help make things worse because then people will get so pissed off that they'll be better, right? I'm not saying that. What I am saying is I think that things are often much more likely to get done, the most important things, if you have some sort of pressure from outside of the system, from the some equivalent. You mentioned the Civil Rights Act being passed, and of course it's true, right, that it wouldn't have gotten passed, I'm sure, without the sort of political skills and lobbying and everything of LBJ at the point where he decided this was something he had to do. But also, LBJ wouldn't have done that if not for the civil rights movement having, these huge marches in Selma where, kids were being fire hosed, and it was a massive international embarrassment, in the Cold War. I mean, he'd been a segregationist for a long time before that. So the point is that the idea, that things getting done is primarily a matter of everybody, sitting in the room in the West Wing saying, well, President Bartlett says something inspiring and it makes the Republicans feel ashamed, and then they make a compromise. I think is off. I think that the most important social reforms happen because, sure, of legislative victories, but also grassroots pressure that helps lead to them. And in this, and very often, it is going to be something that is not going to get, like, especially in a counter-majoritarian institution like the Senate, is not going to get, some massive, majority in favor of it, which is why, yes, it is great to get the lead out. That's good. But it is also the case that anything that would have done anything for the looming climate catastrophe was gutted from this bill. Anything that would have done anything, for housing, was gutted from this bill. And the fact that was gutted to make it bipartisan, even though, at least if all the Democrats could have gotten on board with this, then it could have been passed. The whole thing could have been passed with zero Republican votes. I think, but nevertheless, making it bipartisan was treated as if it was something that we should applaud because it's bipartisan. Right. That's what I'm trying to push back against.
Hang on. Very quickly, because we're out of time.
Sure.
I wish I had more time with you. I do. I love Nina Turner. Now,
yeah.
Eric Adams is going to be the new mayor of New York City.
Yeah.
Not a lefty.
No.
Nina Turner lost to Ms. Brown. Nina Turner, a lefty. Mm-hmm. Was expected to win Ohio 11, and it was a pretty wide margin, 5,000 votes or 7,000 votes. It was pretty big, what I last saw. Mm-hmm. Cori Bush did something big. She slept on the steps of the Capitol and scared Nancy Pelosi into getting Joe Biden to renew the CDC eviction moratorium, despite it not holding up in court. But Nina Turner,
yeah.
the Democratic, the Congressional Black Caucus, Clyburn, the Clinton wing. What happened? Why did Nina Turner? Why in a what is that, like a plus 15 district? That is as blue can get.
Yeah.
Who do you blame for that? The left or the Clinton machine?
Well, this might be a. I have mixed feelings about introducing this in the last minute or so that we have, but I've got to say, Turner was winning until in the polls until a giant spending surge in the last stage of the campaign. There's some evidence that the spending surge and the specific issue that it was sort of the advertisers
fracking. It was a Jewish woman who has a fortune in fracking.
I mean, by far the largest.
It was progressive, but there was a lot of, when you add up the money, Nina Turner had a lot of money.
Nina Turner had a lot of money, but there was also, but the two things that are relevant here are one, that there was a lot of money that went to Shontel Brown at the last minute, and two, that Democratic Majority for Israel PAC, that is the largest single chunk of interest group money by far. Right, need to add a lot of money from small donations, but that is the largest interest group contribution by far. And I think there's some evidence that a lot of people who don't normally vote in Democratic primaries, would normally vote in the Republican primary, didn't bother to because they figured it doesn't really matter. It's a deep blue district. And there was, they keep saying Nina Turner is super anti-Israel, so let's go vote at least to defeat her, and that was a big factor. And I've got to say, it is kind of funny to me that like a lot of mainstream Democrats spent the last 5 years, a lot of that time fretting about people interfering in elections on behalf of foreign governments. And I keep thinking, well, what if we had a Republican majority for Russia PAC that's spent lavishly in Republican primaries to make sure that the most Trumpy, or the most Russia-friendly candidate won, that openly said that was what it was doing. That like
it was an American citizen.
So you think
that was an American citizen who is.
So you think that if the Republican majority for Russia PAC existed, that openly doing this on behalf of the Russian government, as long as they were all American citizens, you think MSNBC would have no problem with this? That Rachel Maddow would have no issue with it, for example?
Well, what I think is we got to do better than blaming the heir to a fracking fortune for Nina Turner's loss. We got to do better than pointing. It sounds as bad as the Hillary supporters blaming Putin for her loss. You knew that this was going to happen in Ohio 11. You knew that at the last minute that kind of money was going to come in. That should have been. So it says to me, Jamie Harrison, the African American who ran against Lindsey O. Graham, had twice as much money as Lindsey O. Graham. But Jamie Harrison still lost. He spent way more money than Lindsey O. Graham.
I mean, that statistically that's not at all the norm, right?
It's how you spend your money.
Okay,
Democrats.
But in the vast majority of cases, right, the candidate with more money wins. Now, not always. It's not a...
No. They've done a study. Hang on for 1 second. We have to wrap it. The Democrats don't know how to spend money. They waste it on television when they should be texting voters. There's money and there's money, and Mrs. Brown's campaign does not know how to spend money. That goes to consultants. It doesn't go towards getting votes. Well, that's consultant money.
That's sure, and that sounds plausible to me. And I'm sure there are lots of things you could say. It's multi-causal, like everything else. There are lots of factors, but I also think that saying, well, sometimes the candidate with less money wins, so let's not really talk about the money. I think.
Do we know that Nina had less money?
I'm pretty sure we do, and certainly whether that's true or not, what we do know is that there was a lot of money that came in at the last minute, and that before this last minute injection, she was ahead in the polls. I mean, like those two things, as far as I know, are uncontroversial.
Do you think there's a problem that she didn't vote for Hillary in 2016?
Maybe, yeah. I mean, I don't know with how many people, but sure. I mean, I'm sure everything. This is a structural problem for the left that in general elections being seen as being relatively independent from the Democratic brand is an asset. In Democratic primaries, it's a liability. I mean, that was a problem with Bernie too.
I wanted Nina Turner to win.
Yeah.
I hate Hillary Clinton. The fact that Hillary Clinton would get involved in this race shows how petty the Clintons are and how destructive they are. And that Barack and Michelle rather plan his 60th on Martha's Vineyard than go fight for Nina Turner shows how bankrupt the Democratic Party is. That being said, there's something isn't working for us on the left. Something isn't working. We have a messaging problem, and I'll tell you what I really think the problem is that I've learned being a stand-up comic. When I was a full-time stand-up comic, I did everything right that I was capable of doing, and I would get laughs, but I could never get the audience to love me, to like me. And it was my downfall as a stand-up comic. It was more important for me to make the audience laugh than make them love me. And as a result, I got left behind as a stand-up comic. And it gave me some insight into politics. Whether you like it or not, it's not fair. It's not fair that I started with Rob Schneider and I felt I was getting more laughs per minute, but the audience loved him and they didn't love me. It's not fair. But that's the way it is. I started with Jake Johansson. In my heart, I thought I got more laughs per minute than Jake Johansson. Yeah, but they love Jake. They hate you. But that's not fair. Well, that's the way it is. Now, I can blame the audiences and say they're stupid and shallow. Or maybe I can look at Jake and Rob Schneider and say, why are they so lovable and likable and I'm not?
So what's the takeaway here for Nina Turner?
That I'm a leftist, and I think people who aren't leftists are ignoramuses, and I don't think that makes us likable.
Okay, I mean, but clearly there are immensely likable.
I don't think we're likable.
I think it depends. I mean, I think Bernie Sanders is pretty fucking popular among Republicans and independents in Vermont.
But he's a miracle of politics because he isn't likable. He doesn't wear his likability on his sleeve. And that's what makes him a political genius. That it's the flip side, that people love him because he doesn't try to be loved. But very few people can pull that off. He's a unicorn, as they say. Bernie's a miracle of democracy. I'm not going to talk about myself. I'm only going to talk about the issues, and I'm going to be cranky and angry, and you're going to love me for that. And even that wasn't enough. There's a likability problem. People don't like us.
Sure. I mean, I do think, certainly, the Bernie case is kind of funny because 2020, he lost to somebody who was likable, but 2016, he lost to one of the least likable people in the history of electoral politics. So it's not, it's like money, right? That these are things that help a lot, but none of them by themselves guarantee anything.
Right. How much time do you have? I can move some things around, or do you have to go?
I can stick around for a minute. Just let me send a quick text about my next thing. Give me a second.
You know what? Go. I'm going to stay on schedule. That's not fair. Ben Burgess, I love you. I could talk to you I'm going to fly and go to a Lugnuts game. Hey, go buy Canceling Comedians While the World Burns. It's a great book. canceling comedians while the world burns. Listen to Give Them an Argument. And we have to figure out Zizek. I'm terrified of having him on the show. He's so beyond. Okay. Thank you, sir.
I have. I mean, I've interviewed Zizek twice. One, he likes dirty jokes. Two, he like interviewing Zizek is the easiest thing in the world. You just ask him like a question, and then there'll be 5 minutes before you get a chance to ask a second one. You just kind of set him off and then hope to catch up and ask something else later. But anyway, David, it makes you
wrap it up.
Feel any better. I like you. I'll see you next week.
I like you too. Thank you. Ben Burgis. Thank you, Ben Burgis.